we are preparing for live stream and we're on. Okay. If you're out there watching, welcome to my page. I'm Jayne Ann Krentz and I'm excited because my guest today is a good friend as well as a wonderful writer, J.T. Ellison.
Hi,
Yay.
y'all. Yay.
And J.T. has had an especially exciting year. You can see I don't handle excitement well. Because you've had two books out recently. A
hmm
Very Bad Thing in November. I think this came out in November and is yes. And
Yep, November 1st.
this is straight up contemporary psychological suspense with a great premise, and we'll get to that later. And under her Joss Walker name, The Book of Spirits, which is the next book in her wonderful Jane Thorne CIA Librarian series. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that CIA librarian. I think I told you once that I tried to become I was getting ready to apply to be a CIA librarian.
I know. It's like, what a cool job. I,
And then
I
I
can't even
realized I
imagine
can't
how neat that would be.
and then I realized I can't keep a secret for more than 5 minutes. So this is not the career path for me. Anyhow, welcome, and it's great to see you. And we're going to talk about both books, but I want to ask you first about A Very Bad Thing because not only does it have a wonderfully hot pink cover, which is
The big pink book.
a big pink book, yeah. Um,
Pink book.
but this is a little close to home because it's about an author who gets murdered on tour. And as soon as she wrote it, I bet you had a few second thoughts.
Second, third, fourth, fifth.
What could go
Didn't want
wrong?
to tour. I mean, I was like, I was not going to Colorado. There's no way I was going to Colorado.
That's where the murder
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, that's where it happens. Yeah, Columbia Jones is this mega best-selling author. I mean, combine everybody that you know and then, put it to the next level. She's, a Nora combined with a Grisham combined with a King. I mean, she's just huge, juggernaut author. And she is murdered the last night of her tour, the night after she appears at Poison Pen. She's at Poison Pen, and then she goes to a theater event in Denver, and she sees somebody in the audience that, has her kind of pause, and then she faints. And the next thing you know, she's in the hospital, and they're like, oh, it's just altitude sickness. The next morning, the reporter who's been on tour with her writing the definitive Columbia Jones for a magazine finds her dead in her bed and got to figure out, who was she murdered? Why was she murdered? And there's 8 points of view, and as we get into it, we realize, oh, everybody has maybe cause to want Columbia dead.
A motive.
A
Yeah.
motive.
That brings up just the mechanical part of how do you plot that with so many points of view? How do you have a storyboard? How did you go about that?
Scrivener. I have my Scrivener. I couldn't do anything without Scrivener. I mean, it absolutely is everything. So and I do it. I'm really visual. I want to talk about how you say you're not visual because I think you are. But I am wicked visual, right? So I color code the different eras of time and I color code the different characters so I can see. And then like if it's an action sequence, I put a caution sign that's in red so I can see, exactly what the cadence of the story is, that it's
Ah, very clever.
going
Yeah.
like this and the rising exposition, I guess is the correct term. Um, so yeah, and that way I can just look on the left-hand side and figure it out.
Does Crit Scrivener's running it down the left-hand side?
Yeah,
Ah.
yeah, it's really, oh my gosh, it's so much easier.
I've heard people rave about it, but it always seemed like a vast learning curve.
It is a vast, it took me 5 books to figure it out. Like I would write them in Word and I would import them to Scrivener and then I
Ah,
would work in Scrivener and then, export them to Word. And it took 5 books. And now though, I was trying to do edits on my next year's book. And
mhm.
I just was like, what do I do? What do I do? I had to move stuff around. It was in Word. And I literally ended up having to open Scrivener and move stuff around in Scrivener and then copy and paste it into Word because my brain just doesn't work in Word anymore.
Oh,
It
that's
was hard.
interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. Well, I guess we do adapt and then that's the new normal. And
It
yeah,
is.
yeah.
It is. It's so much easier though when you're doing multiple points of view and multiple times and all of that to
Yes, because you had a
it's right.
lot to juggle in this book because I think that's kind of the nature of suspense. You've just got a lot to juggle and you're dealing with personalities. Each point of view has a different personality.
Right. Which
It's
is
an
that's fun, right? I mean, that's you do the same thing. I mean, you're not going to get away with this. So obviously, we're going to talk too about Shattering Dawn. It's absolutely
Oh, yes, I'm excited.
spectacular.
I'm excited about it. Yeah, it's out now.
Yeah.
This is the third book in a trilogy that started with Sleep No More.
Mhm.
Middle book was The Night Island, and now this one. And it's about three women who walk into the wrong hotel
Yeah, really.
and lose a night of their lives. And they wake up the next morning and they realize someone has been conducting paranormal experiments on them, and they now have some psychic powers. And so they set out to find out who did this to them. And in the process, they set up a podcast called The Lost Night Files. So the overall name of the trilogy is The Lost Night Files. And um, this book, Shattering Dawn, brings it to a conclusion. So that actually was an interesting process for me. It's the second time I've done a trilogy, which requires, as we both know, you have to have a standalone story in each book.
Right, in each one.
Basically, a murder mystery, a suspense, a novel of suspense that stands on its own, and then an overarching question that kind of takes takes you through the trilogy to get answers. Um,
How hard is writing the third book in the trilogy?
it's hard because you realize you have to close up everything now. You have to
Yeah.
answer all the all the threads that look so cute when you were doing them. Oh, this is a clever idea, Jayne. And now it's like, oh, I better figure out why I put that in there. Um, but that's because I do not plot very well. I'm not, I wouldn't describe myself as a total pantser. That's kind of old and overdone, I think, but I do not have a clear plot outline when I start. I only have a general idea of what the real underlying problem is going to be. I think more in terms of what the conflict is going to be. How about you? Do you go with the plot first or the conflict between the characters? Because you've got
Uh, I am learning that every book is different. So,
yeah.
some of them I have a really strong, I know exactly what the characters, what that friction is going to be.
Uh-huh.
Um, I write a lot about marriages that go, that are going wrong or something is happening in a marriage. And so that's really easy to imagine stuff, though I've got a really, calm and happy home life. It's not, I'm really stretching for that kind of stuff. But like a cop book, if I'm writing an FBI book or I'm writing a Nashville Police, a Taylor Jackson or a Samantha Owens, those are, those are kind of plug and play, right? You've already got the characters, you've already got their central conflicts, you already know the themes, you know what kind of books they are. You're not trying to make those decisions. The voice is already there, the point of view has been established. Um, I think Lee Child writes in third person, right? And I think he had a couple of Reacher books that he did in first person. It was like jarring. It's
Oh,
like, wait a second, we're all the way in his head now. This is bizarre. So those things are already established. But with the standalones, with these suspense novels, you got to figure all of that out up front or as you're going. And the fun for me is kind of figuring it out as I go. I mean, I
yeah.
started a new book this week and it was the first day, everything was in first person. And then I realized, no, 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 it's going to be way
Oh,
too
really?
limiting. First person is limiting to me.
It is to me too. I like the idea, but when I realize I can't jump into anybody else's head, and
Mhm.
I kind of rely on that to keep the story moving. So you have a real gift for the pacing. I admire that enormously.
Thank
You're
you.
right, I mean, you're a classic page turner read. You just
Popcorn thriller, right?
gotta see what happens next. Yeah, I think that's um that's just such a gift for a writer, and especially in suspense, because last thing you want to do is be boring and writing a suspense novel. But
Yeah.
you've always had a gift for it, even in a big book like A Very Bad Thing. Maybe because you had the 8 characters going on, so we were moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're moving around. The trick with that is to make sure you're not giving the same information over and over and over. And
Oh,
that was really hard in this book because there was information that everybody had to get at the same time.
uh-huh.
And the reaction to that information was vital to make the story. So it was difficult. And I'm not doing that again. Let's put it that way. That's
You
not
mean the
happening
multiple
ever
points of view, you mean,
again.
or you mean the multiple point of
No,
view?
no, no. I'm definitely, I like that, but not this that kind of insular story where every person has to react to
To,
what you're seeing, right? So,
yeah.
the structure of that book, if you think about a wheel, the center, Columbia Jones is the center of the wheel, and every spoke of the wheel is one of the points of view. And so it turns, right? It's constantly turning.
Oh my
That
gosh.
was it's a great structure, but I don't know that I'm going to do it again.
So what are you writing now? Or what have you got coming out that you say you're editing?
So I just finished the copy edit of my 25 book called Last Scene. It's the story of it's only got a couple of points of view. Actually, it only has 3 points of view in it. It's very small as far as being insular. It's a story of a woman named Haley James who she's having the worst day of her life, right? She's separating from her husband. She gets fired from her really important job. She thinks she's getting a promotion and she gets fired. It's just one thing after another. She's not having a good day. And she gets a call from her dad that he's fallen and broken his leg and needs to have surgery. And she was like, all right, good excuse to get out of town. So she goes home. She's looking for his insurance cards and finds that her mother, who died in a car accident when she was 6 years old, was actually murdered. She finds an article about it and like, what is going on? So her dad's been lying to her this whole
Yeah.
time.
Oh,
And the
that's a great
story kind of
premise.
spins off from there.
Yeah. So in both books, actually, though, you are capitalizing on the family conflict thing or the
Family conflict is it's
right.
become like a thing for me, and that's fun. It's limiting in its own way. I'm always bucking up against whatever I'm writing. I want to be writing something else, right? I want to be, if I'm writing a standalone, I want to be writing a series title. If I'm writing a series title, I want to be writing a standalone. If I'm writing a thriller, I want to be writing fantasy. I'm never satisfied with what I'm doing. It's not, I don't know that that's healthy. You've jumped around a lot. Is that the sense that you get from it, or is it just you have so many stories that you just
Well, I think that when you're in any one mode, you're aware of the limitations of that mode, and you forget that there are limitations in the other mode. So,
right?
yeah.
Which there are limitations.
But I bet if you look at the back over your body of work, when I look back over mine, you'll find yourself going back to certain conflicts and certain kinds of
Right.
emotional themes that pull you.
The core story,
Core story, yeah.
core
Because
story.
I think that's just what writers do, and we all have our own.
We
Is my
do. Yours is trust.
trust and reinvention. My characters
Twist and
are
reinvention.
sounds like
Mine,
you're going to be playing with that one in the new book. The
yes.
reinvention, yeah. She has to find her. Yeah, I think that is an especially. I just see that as a very American kind of story because that's kind of one of our core values is the ability to you are what you invent yourself to be. You are what you make of yourself. You don't naturally inherit the family chateau or the or the title
Right. The
or
title.
or even the job. Yeah, I mean, you really fundamentally we think in terms of individual um achievement and if you don't make it, it's partly your fault. And that kind of is an American value. So I think the reinvention thing works just culturally for us.
Do you
I
think that
don't know. I don't know how it goes over in Europe, like how do do you sell in Europe?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Okay, so
Um,
what do I?
the
So,
the cop series sells way more than the standalones.
well, that's
Because
interesting.
that is really interesting, that idea. I mean, it is a core American value. I wonder if that's how social media became such the thing that it is. That sense of you can put forth any
You can make
version
yourself.
of yourself for people.
Yes, yeah. That's an interesting yeah, I don't know, but I see it in both of our work that turn well and then
I like reinvention. That's cool.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
think
do
I'm
too.
doing that in the book that I'm writing, and I didn't realize I was doing it. So I'm writing it down because you've already now solved two problems for me today. I'm on a social
I live to serve.
You live to serve. I'm on a social media sabbatical for the month because promotion for this book was haywire. We did a lot of online because I didn't want to do a big physical tour.
Ah,
Because, why? Why? But so I've been taking this month off. And one of the things that I've been doing is like watching people talk about their books, watching some of the Poison Pen interviews with the people that I really enjoy. And I was watching yours this week. I was listening to the last of it this morning, actually.
you heard my version of Leader of the Pack?
Yeah, it was pretty good, actually. I didn't know you could sing. I thought John Charles was a little mean about that. I thought the singing was fantastic.
Jeez, an untapped career path that I can
That was
fall
great.
back in case the bottom falls out of the writing business. Yeah.
You're a very charming speaker. I
Oh,
enjoyed it
thank you.
tremendously.
Oh,
But there was something you said, and I don't even remember what it was, right? It was just something that got me thinking about something that got me thinking about something else that solved a plot point. I was like, oh, wait, I can do this. And so I don't know what you said, but thank you for saying it. And I highly recommend writers go and listen to your favorite authors talk about their work because what a great way to unstick yourself if you're having problems.
yeah, and the store we're talking about, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is called the Poison Pen, and you can find it online. They have a Facebook page as well as a website, and a wonderful store, a physical store in Scottsdale, Arizona. So that's kind of our home store, really, for both of us. It's
Yeah.
become a
It really has. I did tour there. I did go to Scottsdale, of course, because you have to go and see Barbara and do the thing, right? And it's so much fun.
and they do a
Um,
fabulous job with mail orders. So
yeah, that's an incredible store. Absolutely incredible store.
lots of
Incredible
signed
people.
copies, which make great gifts if you need something, in all the genres, not just our suspense or my romantic suspense. It's um, just just almost any genre.
Mystery and fantasy and history, and they've got everything. Just
Yeah.
I think they started as a core mystery store, and
Mhm.
they've built in such a huge readership that they bring in everything now.
Yeah. I saw a big wall of romanticy when I was there.
Oh, romanticy. I love romanticy. I really do. I want to write it, and I know everything would be derivative.
This is kind of, I mean, you set some of the pace here. I mean, this series started a long time before Romanticy did, and you can
Yeah.
see elements of it. The young characters, for example, the coming of age, learning, coming into their power, kind
And
of.
and there is romance. There's romance and there's heartbreak and there's
Yeah,
all of those conflicts on top of people discovering that they have powers and they're magic and it's got to save the world and everything is chaos and all of those really high things, but it's not as messy as romanticy and it's certainly not as explicit. These books are I would say PG rated sex
okay.
in comparison to some of the things that I've been reading lately.
This is what, 6 or 7 books in?
This is the fifth, and the sixth book is coming out probably in March.
And you said that would be
Uh,
the last
and that's it. That's the
this
last book in
March.
the series.
This
Yeah,
March. Oh,
yeah.
so it'll all be wrapped up. Oh my gosh,
Well,
yeah.
I know, and So Jayne Thorne, CIA librarian. Jayne came out of, it was supposed to be a straight series. It was supposed to be a thriller series, kind of a little
Huh?
more light, kind of Homeland meets a J.T. Ellison novel, um, with some snark and a younger character and everything. And it just, nobody wanted me to write it. And, I was, there are times in your career where you're told stay in your lane. And so I stayed in my lane and that was fine. But a friend of mine was over, we were having a brunch, an author's brunch. We were supposed to work in the morning and then write and, or, write in the morning and then, gossip and eat and all of that. And nobody was working except for two people, one of whom was my friend that writes fantasy. And I was looking at her and I'm going, well, that's the kind of work ethic you need. And I started thinking fantasy. What if Jayne had magic? And the
Aha.
whole thing just went, I was like, that's
But
what I
so
need.
going in, that was not the an
That was
element.
not the plan. That was not the plan at
Oh,
all. And once she became magical, I've always wanted to try my hand at fantasy, and it is so much fun. I knew it was going to be a 6 book series. It's
did
like
you?
writing two trilogies. Well, talk about having to sew everything up. Woo.
Yes, yes.
When you said that, I was like, that is one of the hardest things about it is having the resolution to the character so the reader's not like, but what about this? But what about this? But what
Yes,
about this?
yes.
Yeah, that's hard.
So how much of the series did you know going in? Did you know you knew it'd be 6 books?
Knew it would be 6 books,
Hmm.
had the titles for all of the books, had the précis for all of the books. They search out necromantic grimoires, not all necromantic, but they search out grimoires where people have been stashed, hidden, and they try to get the information from them in order to release them to eventually it's a reverse dystopian. We start in a world that only a few people have magic, and by the time we finish, everybody has magic. There are magical schools. The people who don't have magic are actually a rarity, which is, kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I knew the arc of the series from the very beginning.
Ah,
Yeah. It's so
it-
sad. I mean, I'm really sad. They're really fun, and it's not it's my core story in women finding their power.
yes.
Definitely the core story, but you know,
With the and a lighter touch. Um,
they're funny.
yeah.
Jane's a smart aleck. She's much more like me than a lot of my characters.
I had an interesting experience last night. I did an event with Megan Chance and Christina Dodd. And this was at
Okay.
a small community theater in a neighboring little town around here. And it's called the Jewel Box. And they actually hired actors to read scenes from our books.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
and it
fun.
was fascinating because we had no communication with the actors ahead of time. All they had was the scene we had chosen read. And it turned out differently than for all three of us than we thought when we wrote it. That's the funny part
Really?
because that's it's just goes to show that everybody brings something different to a book, and everybody takes something different away. And in what one of the books was seen, the author thought she had written quite seriously. And lo and behold, when the actor took it over, it was kind of snarky humor. And it was like, yeah, that is there. But the author said, I never saw it. Isn't that
Didn't see it.
it? It just goes to show what happens with voice and what people bring to the story and what they take away, and they'll see it no matter what you wrote, they're going to see it slightly differently than what you thought you were writing down on the page. I think it's just a fascinating.
Do you ever listen to your audiobooks? Do you ever, or at least the first couple chapters just to make sure that, it's right and everything?
Yeah, yeah. It's always different.
How different was that than having an actor? Not that
It was
voice actors aren't, but they're not doing it for a
no,
physical audience. They're doing it for an oral audience. It's got to be very different.
I don't know. It's probably a very similar process because the actors take on the role,
Yeah.
and that's what you're seeing your writing interpreted through the actor, and it's like the voice. It doesn't matter if it's a voice or, I mean, either way, it's a voice. And it's quite an interesting experience if you and the audience loved it. They just loved the
Yeah,
whole,
I
they loved,
bet.
yeah, it was a very effective way of talking about your book.
What scene did you choose?
I chose a scene that was, this was for Shattering Dawn, and I chose a scene in which the hero who's very reluctant to use his talent because it's so dangerous. Um, and the heroine is trying to convince him that he needs to use it to help her recover her memories. And so it's the scene where she convinces him to let it run the experiment. So she's talking fast and she's talking persuasively, and but when I wrote it, I didn't write it as seriously in my mind as the actress actually interpreted it, which was kind of interesting. It works both ways,
Right.
but it was more intense when she did it than I remembered having when I wrote it, which was kind of interesting. Because I was seeing it still as kind of a snarky thing, kind of a you can do this, we can do this, trust me, I know what I'm doing here. That kind of attitude from her. And she interpreted it as a very serious, we don't have any choice, we have got to do this. I know it's a risk, but that kind of a
Yeah.
accepting the risk involved, whereas in the story, the heroine doesn't really care about the risk. She knows there's a risk, but she's determined. And I don't know, it works both ways, but it just went to show that what you write is not always what people are going to read into the
No,
story.
no, they're going to read into it what they will. You said also, which I thought was really important for people to hear and understand, that some books are going to work for people and your core story is going to work for some people, and there are some people that it's just never going to work for, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's what makes books. That it's what makes any kind of art, isn't it? No two
Yeah.
pieces of art ever land the same way.
That's
So
fascinating though. I would love to see stuff acted out. My audiobook narrators are phenomenal. I've been so lucky with all of them. But I
oh,
would
they
love to
make
see
they,
it.
they make or break a book.
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, if
100%.
if no matter what you wrote, if that voice doesn't work for the listener, they just put down the book. They don't finish the book. It's just very fascinating.
I saw Diana Gabaldon is having all of her books retaped with a new actress. Davina
Oh,
Porter did all the earlier books.
ah,
And now the woman who plays Jenny Murray in the TV show, they're going to re-record it all. I'm like,
oh,
I wish they would do like a live action with hers, like they do with some of the fantasy, because
uh-huh.
that would be really neat to have a cast of characters doing the audio, you know,
Probably expensive
especially,
though, because then you're hiring all those
yeah,
everything else.
especially when they start doing the sound effects. So it sounds like a radio show.
Oh, really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah.
Oh,
Fourth Wing. So Rebecca Yaros, they have
that's what they
they
do.
have a live action. Yeah, that's I haven't listened to it yet because I'm rereading it for like the third time in anticipation of the new book coming out this week. Um, but yeah, that is definitely like a new thing in fantasy, along with
Yeah.
sprayed edges. Now they're doing live action
Yeah, I love the
audio.
images.
I do too. I do too. I can't wait to see. I ordered, the special version of that. I can't, I've got the other ones. One of them I bought online and it's just black edges. And then another one I got from Etsy and I had it ordered and it's got the dragons printed on it. It's so cool.
We're back to decorating books again. It reminds me
Back to
of
decorating books.
the 19th century or earlier when everything was bound in very expensive leather bindings and decorated. And yeah, it's kind of an
So
old tradition we lost for a while and now we've got it back.
we're getting it back. It's really funny you say that. Randy gave me for Christmas my own Shakespeare folio.
Oh,
And it's four books from 1782.
oh
They
my.
are, they've got those really neat end papers and it's all gold and oh
Wow.
my gosh, it is what a treasure. What an I can't believe he found it in England and had it
Wow.
shipped over. I'm like, okay, he's winning, right? Total win there. But I mean, I love the old books. It's really, really
Yeah.
cool.
Well, look at all the books behind you. You've got organized by color.
And everything's on the shelf. Oh my gosh, we had we had a crazy holiday. We had a holiday party, and I was like determined there were not going to be any books on the floor. So
Were there
I
usually books on the floor? Oh, you
oh,
had them on.
they were stacked. Yeah.
Oh,
I brought in a bunch of stuff from my parents' library. We downsized them to, you know, and we had to do something with a bunch of the books. We gave like 400 away. My parents were big readers, but I brought home a bunch of the ones that really were like either valuable and there's a first printing of something, a bunch of old Grishams and Clancy's and
mhm.
Aldous Huxley, I've got a bunch of new books that had to get on the shelf. So I was very proud of myself for getting that all organized. I'm determined to stay organized this year.
That's your goal, huh? I always think
That
of you
is
as
my.
organized. You are one of those organized people I know because you have so many writing projects going on at one time. I couldn't do that. How do
I
you do
just,
that?
my poor Randy, I was showing him a cover concept and for one book and talking about the plot of another book. And he was looking at the cover concept and he was like, I don't get it. What? And I'm like, well, the rabbit. He was like, wait, what book is this for? I was like, for that one. He was like, oh, yeah, there's always a lot. There's always a lot of things hopping around. What am I going to do, Jayne, when I'm not writing fantasy?
I don't
When I
know.
don't
What are you
have
going
that
to
as the
do?
second book of the year?
Yeah, what are you going to do?
I mean, write faster and write more thrillers, right?
I don't know. Because maybe you need the fantasy just to do something different. Give yourself a fresh slate. When you come out of one book, you're into another world. I don't know.
I mean, do you feel like you're doing that when you're switching? Because you switch genres. I mean, you
Yeah.
move around a little
My
bit.
core story would remains the same, but different worlds give me different plots, uh,
Hmm.
different feel for the characters. And the historical is different from the contemporary, which is different from the futuristic, and it's just enough to make to keep me refreshed as a writer, I think. And
Right.
I suspect that's what you've been doing. You're going to miss it if you don't do it, I suspect, because you're used to having that well, you've got the other kinds of series too. You've got the detective series. You could go back to one of
Yeah.
those. Like,
Yeah. Could go back to that. Could, try something new. I keep threatening to write a rom-com. Nobody wants me to do that. Actually, my agent and my editor were like, yeah, let's do it. But my readers are like, are you kidding me? What? But,
you don't see that. Yeah, they
yeah,
do.
but reinvention, right? Isn't
Yeah.
if that's the core theme, then reinventing ourselves as writers, that's probably not a terrible thing to think about doing,
But
right?
it's almost scary when you think about, oh, I could do anything I want, but then what do I want to do? It's like too much choice almost sometimes.
Are there any books that have been in the back of your mind that you want to write that you just have not tackled?
No, I've always been able to write out whatever the story is that's on my head in my mind. Um, for me, reinvention in the books has been mostly about changing the eras. Um,
Right.
yeah, and that's been sufficient because I kind of well, one thing I think we're locked into our voices, and me more so than you, because I think you have more voice variable or more options with your voice because you can go lighter as you did with the Book of Spirits, and
Yeah.
then darker as you did with A Very Bad Thing. And I mean, this is very dark and intense compared to the
Very.
CIA books. Yeah, so my books tend to have the same kind of lighthearted feel. I don't have a dark voice, so to speak. I've tried. It's not like I
You
haven't
don't
tried.
think you have a dark voice? I do.
Do you? Yeah. I don't
I
know, but I always end up with a joke. I always end up somebody being snarky. I always end up with um, there's a kind of a fundamental optimism in my books. It's very hard. That is part of who I am and how I write.
But it's the journey there
Yeah.
where you explore the darkness and then move to the light, right?
Yeah.
Literally move to the light. There, you don't think that the concept of the Lost Night Files is not really dark? And you've got assassins in this book. You've got murder in this book.
I don't think of those as dark.
And a stalker. Well, yeah, because I mean, you can read horror. To me, there's darkness in this for sure.
Oh, okay. Well, see, everybody sees something different in,
Everybody pulls something different.
yeah, yeah. It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. When did you, I'm curious about high concept, right? The idea of a high concept book,
Well,
right?
remember they told us that back in our early days. Well, we need a high concept. We need,
Yeah, we
and we
need
all
high
say,
concept.
"What's that?"
What do you think that is? Because when you're just giving the pitch of the Lost Night Files, three women go to a hotel and it's the wrong hotel, and they wake up the next morning and their minds have been manipulated. That's high concept, right?
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
high concept. Are you thinking about that when you're coming up with the pitch for this?
No, I think fundamentally I come from the Gothic. I
Mhm.
don't write the dark Gothic, but I think of the Gothic as my foundational books. It's the story I'm drawn to. Um, as a reader, I love a good Gothic. And I think of that woman isolated on her own, constrained somehow, can't move around, is in an
Right.
isolated situation, and she doesn't know who to trust. And then on top of all that, she starts seeing things or wondering if she can trust what her eyes are showing her. And that little whisper of, am I going mad? I find fascinating. And it works well with my psychic stories because when you suddenly wake up with psychic powers, that's the first thing you're going to ask yourself, am I delusional? You know,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Um, what's wrong with me? Um, and so those elements I think of as very Gothic, core Gothic kinds of elements. And I've always loved working with those elements. So um, I have toyed with the idea of doing a darker Gothic, but I
Please.
I run up. I think I when in that interview with the Poison Pen, thought I made it clear. The reason I haven't actually done that is because I don't have a gift for description. I'm such a dialogue-driven writer, and the Gothic really needs description. So,
But
so
again, for what people see, right? The Night
yeah,
Island, that's pretty evocative description of everything that's going on. I mean, if that is a Gothic to me, the Night Island is absolutely a Gothic.
the island provides the isolation element. Yeah,
The isolation, but just even the description of the gardens and how everything feels. So much of the Gothic is just the sense of dread.
yeah,
And I think you
exactly.
do that incredibly well. I would be first in line to read a pure Jane Ann
Gothic.
Krentz Gothic. I think everybody would.
There's a lot of that in here because you've got a very tightly knit circle around the dead author, and and that whole idea of death in a hotel room, there's only a limited access,
Yeah,
and
locked. It's sort of a locked room mystery,
yes,
in
yeah,
some ways, but
and
um,
nobody can trust anybody else.
right. So trust is a huge component with that too. I really do like writing Gothic, and I try not to just do it every single time,
You've done
though
some great ones, yeah.
that is that is kind of my, oh, I want to do that. But I think this new book that I just started this week is going to have some really Gothic elements to it because it's just so much fun. It's just such a wonderful genre to work within, and you can do so many different things with it.
Yes, and it's a great one for the underlying woman coming into her power thing. It's totally suited for that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah. Give her some agency again.
yeah.
I
Oh, this
love
is
it.
exciting. What else? What else? Oh, one other thing before we go, we were going to talk about the visual versus the non-visual. You were saying I think of you as a visual writer, and I don't think of myself as a visual writer. I think of
And
myself,
I disagree completely because I
well,
can see everything that you're saying, right? And even if you don't have to have exposition to be a visual writer, right? I think you can draw a scene with dialogue and we know exactly what everything looks like. We know what the characters look like because we're seeing them through somebody else's eyes. We know what when she comes in to see Gideon, We know what his office looks like. We know what he looks like. We know, I mean, all of those things are visual elements that are right
Those, yeah,
there.
yeah. And I
You're
just
just
never thought
using
of,
dialogue to explain it instead of long pages of exposition.
yeah. I guess in that sense, I do see it. I just always say I hear the characters before I see them. And
Do you have a mind's eye? Have you ever done the mind's eye test?
no, no,
If you shut your eyes, and everybody can do this, everybody who's watching can do this. You shut your eyes
yes,
and you think of an apple.
yes.
What do you see?
I have to concentrate, but I can see an apple.
Does it have a color?
Green and red, greenish.
Okay. Okay. So you're seeing it. So 20% of the population, when you ask them to do that, blank.
They don't see an apple.
They don't see anything. They don't have a mind's eye. Like they talk to themselves in the mirror, but they don't have an inner voice, an inner monologue.
Oh my
And I know
gosh.
some writers that can do this, and it just blows my mind because I spend so much of my writing life in my head, right?
Yes,
Everything is in
yes,
my head. I hear it, I see
yes,
it. It's very, when I say I'm a visual writer, I'm seeing the scene play out in my head. I
yeah.
hear the dialogue. I immediately see where they are in the room, what the furnishings look like. Is the sun coming in? Is it, is it day? Is it night? Is, all of those things. What are they wearing? I see it all like it's a movie.
Okay, I don't get that clear a picture. Um, but it comes to me as they start talking. So I guess I get it, but eventually, but it follows the dialogue rather than the pre, yeah. That's
Isn't that
interesting.
interesting?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the whole mind's eye and inner voice, inner monologue is fascinating. Like
it,
when you're reading a book, do you hear the voices as different
yeah,
voices? Yeah, I
yeah,
do too.
yeah,
But
yeah.
my friend that does not have the mind's eye, she was like, "What?"
Well,
And she's
does
an
she enjoy
amazingly
it?
successful author, so it's not hurting her in any way. It's just a different brain mechanism. It's
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. Well, it's like dreams. They never understand dreams. They keep researching them, but they really don't know how they work or why they work or
or
just lots
what they are.
or
Do
what
you
they
have a
are.
really active dream life?
Yeah, I think everybody does, but you just don't always remember them.
Don't always remember them.
Yeah. But you know that you did. You know you weren't just blank all night.
It's funny. I dream more in the morning. Like if I've woken up and go back to sleep, that's when I have a dream.
Well, they say that's typical because that's when dreaming happens when you're closer to the surface, not,
Yeah.
yeah. We probably dream when we're underneath. We just don't remember it, which is kind of freaky, but I don't
I
know.
wish there was a way
Nobody
to tap
knows.
into all of that. I mean, that would just be, I know the whole Jungian thing is pretty intense on
Yeah,
tapping into the dream world, but
yeah.
that would
Well,
be wild.
I like the fact that there aren't a lot of solutions because that gives you plenty of room for plots.
Do you dream your plots at all?
No, it's something you think about before I go to sleep, and it's the first thing I think about in the morning, but I'm not aware of usually. Once in a while, I'll have a dream and I'll think in the dream, oh, this is a really good plot line. I got to remember this in the morning. And then I wake up in the morning, well, that was dumb. That was not going to work.
Right?
It
That's
worked for the dream, but it didn't work for the reality. Writing the book, yeah. So,
I've dreamed the plot of several stories.
have you?
Yes.
Like
My
what?
very first book, All the Pretty Girls, dreamed
Yeah.
the entire thing start to finish, got up in the middle of the right night, wrote 13 pages in a reporter's notebook,
Wow.
and
Wow.
then put it away. And I found it, when we were moving, and I read it. And except for one character who ended up coming into the series in a later book,
Yeah.
everything was the same. So I dreamt that one. Dreamt the one that's coming out this year, my new one, Last Scene.
Oh,
I
fascinating.
I dreamt a huge portion of that, and it has now changed because that was a rom-com. It was a romance. It was more of a what's the word I'm looking for? It was like a near future situation. Um,
Okay.
kind of a Stepford. Wives
Oh,
meets
yes.
the Tuscan Sun kind of thing, um, with stuff that could never happen. But I used the basis of that and the feeling of that town and everything. Have I ever told you this story?
Yeah.
So it was a town called Brockville, right? Just, I mean, really named after Brock. Brock was the main character. Brock was the main hero in Brockville. I mean, it was just like kind of silly. And I told my agent about it, and she got really quiet. And I was like, "Yeah, I know. I'm a terrible pitcher." Just, she was like, "No, it wasn't that." She goes, "Did I tell you I was staying in a town called Brockville this week?" She was on vacation
Oh my
in,
God.
in Canada, and she dropped her phone in the water and had to go get a new phone in Brockville. And it had happened like the day before I had this dream.
Oh,
Really weird.
psychic
I was like, all
intercept.
right,
Yeah.
we got to use Brockville. And so Brockville is in the new book, but it's a much darker place now than it was. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, isn't that weird? So yeah,
Yeah.
I try to tap the dream stuff as much as I can because it just
Yeah.
makes life so much easier if it's all there.
You're psychic.
Have you ever been with a psychic? Have you ever had a reading or anything like that?
Uh-uh. Not that I knew of.
Not that you know of.
Not that I remember, unless they hypnotize me. Maybe forget. But it's fun to play with. It makes for great I like working with the psychic thing because it's just one step beyond intuition.
Right. It is
And
your general intuition, which in a crime novel, your characters have to have some intuition or else they fall flat,
yeah, and I'm sure in real world we use it more than we realize too. So,
probably.
or ignore it. And we know when we're doing it, we how many times have we said, I knew I shouldn't have done that? I knew I didn't listen to my intuition,
We
and
ignore it at our own peril.
yeah.
And that's also a really, in the kind of work that I do, somebody ignoring that intuition gets them in trouble. And
Yes.
and that's a huge catapult into story for me.
Yes. Yeah.
It
I
has,
think,
but it has to not be, you're going to throw the book across the room because it's like, what are you thinking, you
yeah,
idiot?
it has to be something believable, but
Hmm.
we've all done it.
Yeah,
Ignore the
for sure.
intuition. Yeah. Well, this has been great catching up with you. And
As
to
always.
I would wind up by saying that my guest is J.T. Ellison, author of A Very Bad Thing, a great novel of psychological suspense. J.T. writes real page-turning kind of suspense. Trust me, you're going to love it if you love that kind of story. And under another name, Joss Walker, the fifth book in her Jayne Thorne CIA library. And I will point out that the Jayne is spelled like mine, Jayne.
It is. It is. Named after Jane.
That could have been me. I was close.
I know. Isn't that fun? And obviously, y'all, it is release week for Shattering Dawn, this absolutely stunning cover that your shirt matches. Very nicely done.
Yeah, didn't even think.
Congratulations. Congratulations on another amazing book. I love it. I'm halfway through it and I love these books. I love your imagination.
Oh, thank
I
you.
love the world that you've created. What are you going to do after this? Is this all wrapped up? There's not going to be any more Lost Night Files?
Probably on as a in the background. I'll reference it in the future. I've kind of decided that this is a world I want to play in, so I can create different stories within this world, but touch base with some of the older books and the people who follow the books will. You don't have to read those books to know where we are,
Right.
but if you know them, you'll catch the Easter egg kind of thing.
Well,
So
and the Sweetwaters, I mean, that
yes,
whole family. You haven't defined how large that family is.
yeah, I'm not pinning myself down because I may need them more.
Oh, it's awesome. It's a great book, and I'm so thrilled to have another Jayne Ann Krentz on my shelf.
Well, I am thrilled to know that there's another J.T. Ellison coming. We are a mutual admiration society.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Absolutely.
Well, I wish you all the best in the spring, and I hope to get together again this year if you're on tour in the Seattle area or vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to come out to Seattle this year. That would be awesome.
Great. I'll be here. All right.
Good.
Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the chat with J.T. Ellison, and happy reading.